So guys, as you all know, I am somewhat of a gamer girl, but I also love to just relax and play games on my phone after a long day. And so what I want to tell you all about, the most recent game I've been obsessed with, is the sponsor of today's video, Royal Match. Royal Match is a match 3 puzzle game where you help King Robert renovate his castle. Now, I am absolutely crazy for some good interior design, so if you're anything like me and love to make ugly things look pretty, you're going to love this game. There are thousands of levels, so you can take as much time as you like to escape reality and all your anxiety to play all night long. And my favorite thing is that there are no ads in this game, and you don't even need an internet connection, so you can play whenever and wherever you like. All you have to do to get started is head to my description of this video and click the link, and I promise you'll love it as much as I do.
She was on the phone with my brother when she pulled up to the car. She looks at the site and sees a body and tells my brother that he sent a text and said it's Kylan and Crystal.
These are Kylan Schultz and Crystal Turner. They'd been married for just 4 months when they were killed and dumped in Moab, Utah. But who had the motive to commit such a gruesome act? And why did it take so long for the police to catch him? It would take over a year for the police to track down the women's killer. And when they did, it was a minute too late. Let's explore the tragic case of Kylan and Crystal. This case takes place in Moab, Utah, but we'll be starting in Montana because this is where Kylan Schultz's tragic story began. Kylan was born on September 5th, 1996 in Colorado, but when she was still a child, her parents decided to move the whole family to Billings, Montana. There, Kylan attended Billings Senior High School and worked part-time as a welder.
Kylan was great. She was really sweet. She was very attentive. Kylan was a professional at listening. She actually paid attention to what people were telling her, and then she recalled it. So she was a treat to visit with.
But her adolescence was filled with hardship. Kylan's first committed relationship turned out to be seriously abusive and traumatic, and when Kylan was barely an adult, her younger brother died in a shooting. This was all too much for Kylan. She started suffering from severe depression and had recurrent suicidal thoughts. She was not the once energetic, positive girl everyone knew her as. Sometime during Kylan's adolescence, her parents broke up. Her mother went on to remarry and adopt her new husband's 2 children. But after losing her brother, Kylan moved in with her father, Sean Paul. Sean Paul was a loving, supportive figure for his daughter, and he worked hard to make her feel better through the tough times. One of his ideas was moving to Moab, Utah. There, the two of them could have a fresh start to life and try to recover from the tragedy of losing a son and a brother. It turns out it was a great idea. There, Kylan would meet the love of her life. In 2019, Kylan and her dad were taking a hike together when they bumped into a woman named Crystal Turner. Crystal was 14 years Kylan's senior, and she had a warm, positive energy that was perfect for Kylan. She'd also moved to Utah recently, and just like Kylan, she was a great outdoors enthusiast. Soon enough, the two were in love with each other. Kylan's whole family was ecstatic to see Kylan come back to life with her love for Crystal.
Her having such a beautiful soul, to see it complemented with someone like Crystal, that they could really enjoy life and do it together.
Kylan would tell Sean Paul that the move to Utah literally saved her life. She made more friends, moved in with Crystal, and got a job as a cashier at the Moonflower Community Cooperative. Crystal also got a job at McDonald's around the same time. They weren't career girls, as you can probably tell. Kylan and Crystal's dream was living a free van life, seeing the world together, and enjoying natural splendor wherever the road took them. In 2020, Kylan and Crystal joined the van life community, and in April 2021, the pair got married. Kylan was happier than she'd ever been. Her life completely turned around within 2 years. She couldn't be more grateful to her father and to Crystal, who helped her see the joy of living again. Sean Paul was also happy that his daughter had found love, and he began loving Crystal like his own daughter, seeing how much she helped Kylan. Sean Paul would say it was love, it was sparks, it was pure light that shined out of those two girls. The newly married couple was certain they had nothing but good days ahead, but tragically, just 4 months into their marriage, they would meet a horrific end. On August 15th, 2021, Crystal was supposed to come to work at McDonald's, but she didn't show up. The next day, Kylan's working place also became worried about her absence. By the evening of August 16th, both women were reported missing to the police. A search immediately ensued, but it wouldn't be the police who'd find the women. The following day, Sean Paul made several pleas on social media, asking for anyone who knew Kylan or Crystal to help find them or come forward with any information. Sean Paul knew the couple had been camping around Whispering Oaks Ranch in Utah. Kylan would always stay in contact with him throughout their camping trips, and this last trip was no exception. In fact, on this camping trip, Kylan had complained to her father about a creepy camper placing his tent way too close to their tent and howling at the women from his truck. It sounded like an awful man, but when Sean Paul expressed his concern about him, Kylan said he was more creepy than dangerous or actually scary. She and Crystal were not afraid of him. Sadly, he truly was dangerous. So knowing the location where the girls were last seen, one of Sean Paul's and Kylan's family friends, Cindy, offered to drive around the camping site and look for any clues. The police had been doing the same for 2 days, but it was a very wild, large area, and no one knew exactly where the women had set up their tent on their last day. As she drove past a narrow road, she noticed a silver glimmer and decided to turn back and check it out. As it turns out, it was the couple's van, borrowed from a friend after their black van had broken down. Cindy was on the phone with Sean Paul when she got out of her car, investigated the silver van, and found Kylan's body floating face down in a creek. Well, before she saw a body, Cindy saw the women's tent and Crystal's rabbit Ruth in a cage with no food or water. Luckily, Ruth was still alive, albeit scared and confused. Cindy knew this was off. Crystal loved her rabbit. After all, she took her everywhere she went. She wouldn't just leave Ruth there all alone with no water. Kylan and Crystal's tent had also been ransacked, so Cindy decided to have a look around the creek near their tent. That's when she saw Kylan's lifeless body while speaking to Sean Paul. Initially, Cindy didn't want to believe it. She quickly turned her head around and tried to make herself believe it was all a big illusion. But as she turned back, she could clearly see it was Kylan. She was naked from the waist down and had been floating for over 24 hours. Poor Sean Paul listened to the discovery of his daughter's body over the phone.
She was on the phone with my brother when she pulled up to the car. She looks at the site and sees a body and tells my brother that he sent a text that said it's Kylan and Crystal.
Sean Paul was wise and caring enough to tell Cindy to get out of there ASAP and call the police. Kylan's killer could still be close, so Cindy ran away, locked herself inside her car, and dialed 911. As the police arrived at the location, they quickly discovered Crystal's body too. She'd also been undressed from the waist down. This was devastating for the women's families, friends, and everyone who knew them, and they wouldn't get any closure for a long time. In fact, what would follow was a series of confused attempts at catching the killer and a number of outrageous theories keeping people in Utah up at night. One of the first questions the police had to ask was who would have the motive to kill Kylan and Crystal. That's when many people argued it was a hate crime, a homophobic monster preying on a recently married gay couple. This would make sense. Kylan and Crystal were newlyweds and they had been flashing their happy life all over social media. Then there was Kylan's account of the creepy camper, and as the police uncovered the full timeline, it gets darker.
On August 12th, Crystal and Kylan met someone they called a quote creepy camper and reported he was uncomfortably close to their area. On August 13th, the women told their friends, if we don't show up to work, come look for us. On August 14th, gunshots and screams were heard at 11:48 a.m.
Yeah, Kylan had told one of her friends if she didn't show up for work the following day, she should look for her. She had a terrible intuition about that man, and tragically, she was right. On August 13th, after finishing her work shift, Kylan met Crystal and two of their friends at Woody's Tavern. This is where Kylan spoke to her friends about the creepy man and worried that something might happen to them. But none of the four women took these worries seriously. Kylan had made her remark as a dark joke more than a warning, and when the friends told the couple to move their tent, they said that he wasn't frightening. According to the autopsy, both Kylan and Crystal had been shot 6 times, but although both had been undressed from the waist down, they hadn't been assaulted. This only baffled the investigators more. Did their killer just want to humiliate them? And why? It seemed like the killer really hated this couple. According to the police report, it appears the gun was emptied on them, which indicates a deep anger, a lot of hate. A hate crime is definitely a motive that's on the table. Before the killer was even identified, the police rushed to inform the people of Utah that this had been an isolated incident. Now, there was no way for the police to know that. This caused some uproar as people believed they were only trying to protect Utah's tourism instead of people's safety. If hikers and campers thought there was a serial killer around, of course they would consider another vacation spot. However, that wasn't exactly fair to the terrified community of Moab, or to the potential tourists for that matter. As the police were failing to come up with suspects, Kylan and Crystal's friends set up a GoFundMe account and offered huge rewards for any information on the killer. Kylan's family even began working with a private detective, hoping to gather more clues. A few months into the case, the police did find a suspect, a 27-year-old man who was working at Kylan's supermarket. He'd been pulled over in the area the day after Kylan and Crystal were killed. When he was pulled over, the man had a defiant attitude that made the cop feel weird, almost as if he was hiding something. After the bodies were found, the police interrogated the man and searched his vehicle. But although he had no alibi for the day of the murder, nothing incriminating was found. And it turns out he had just been hired by the supermarket after Kylan had stopped showing up to work. So he didn't actually know her or Crystal. Then the detective's eyes fell on Cindy, the family friend. They found it a bit suspicious that Cindy knew exactly where to look for the women's bodies, when the police had been looking for them for 2 days. And when they asked her how she found them, she said something about intuition and a cosmic connection to the girls. Needless to say, this didn't help her case. The police confiscated her phone, searched her home, and made her feel terrible. Cindy was nothing but a friend to Kylan and Crystal. Then there was the Gabby Patillo case. If you haven't heard about this case, Gabby was 22 years old when she was strangled to death by her fiance, Brian Laundrie, while they were vlogging their van life through Utah. Coincidentally, this was happening exactly in August 2021, and the two had been stopped in Moab, Utah, shortly before Gabby's disappearance. The case was highly mediatized at the time, so when the news of Kylan and Crystal's murder reached the media, many people argued that this was the same serial killer that had killed Gabby. But at the end of the summer, Gabby's killer was identified as her own fiance, Brian. He had taken his life and left a note admitting to the murder. So the chances were very slim that he was also Kylan and Crystal's killer. Of course, people liked to share their theories, but he was not a person of interest to the Moab police. In the early months of 2022, the police were still gathering clues and sightings that could lead to a suspect.
Anybody that was in the mountain, those Sal Mountains that day, specifically around the noon hour, they may have traveled by this guy, and maybe there was an erratic driver or somebody that cut him off, or something bizarre about another vehicle that was bizarre that caught their attention.
It was only in February that it was revealed that the woman had been shot around noon in broad daylight. This was shocking to Sean Paul. How could no one have seen the shooter or prevented the attack?
I had assumed this whole time for 6 months now that it happened in the middle of the night. What we hope to gain from this new knowledge, it's to fine-tune our search criteria so that the millions of tourists that pass through Moab can fine-tune the time that they're trying to look for a vehicle or dash cam footage, etc.
Drone footage showed the area where Kylan and Crystal had been killed. It was pretty out in the open, so no issues with visibility. But this was not a busy camping site filled with families and communal spots. So it's easy to see why, even in broad daylight, no one would have been around to see the killer or call 911.
This is 6 months of torture. It's every day I have to relive this. If someone came forward and said, oh heck, at high noon on Saturday, there was this guy, I thought maybe he was on his cell phone and he was looking at his cell and he almost ran me off the road. I mean, it would mean the world to me. I can't even tell you, Vinny.
Sean Paul worked tirelessly with the police, setting up a clue booth where people could drop information and thoughts on the case, and constantly appearing on TV and social media, urging people to come forward with anything they knew or thought they knew. Eventually, it all paid off. Remember how initially the police had found a suspect who worked at the same supermarket as Kylan? Here is Adam Pinkueski. He worked at the same McDonald's as Crystal. Adam was an unpleasant person to many people who knew him. He was extremely racist and prone to anger. He had pushed friends away and lost jobs because of his temper. As for his McDonald's job, he'd just lost that one, too. Days before Kylan and Crystal's murder, Adam got into a heated argument with his manager. After she told him he needed to work faster, he made some horrible remarks about her sexuality and threatened to kick her ass. The manager was so distraught that she left the McDonald's and had another manager fill in. That's not fair though. No one should feel unsafe at work, so Adam was fired. And as it turns out, he never returned to get his last paycheck. But Adam was not homophobic. In fact, he was gay too. And it would be his ex-lover that would tell the police he's Kylan and Crystal's killer. In May 2022, Adam's ex was tracked down by the police after Adam had been named a person of interest. Adam's ex was not in Utah at the time of the murders, so he was not a suspect, but the police suspected he might be covering for Adam. And indeed, he was. According to him, he was constantly afraid of Adam's temper and didn't want to know what would happen if he ratted him out to the cops. Apparently, when he tried to Google some information Adam had given him, Adam stole his phone. But once the police asked him about it, he wasted no time in saying Adam had killed Kylan and Crystal, and even told him details about it. He said Adam had told him 2 people he killed were women, and that he the women while they were in the tent. He said he threw the gun somewhere, but he didn't know where. In March 2021, 5 months before killing his victims, Adam had written some very disturbing notes on his phone. "I'm afraid I have an ongoing impulse in me to kill or rape people. I overworked myself, and that's causing me to feel bad and think negative, evil thoughts. And this doesn't define me or say who I am. And I can say it another way redundantly if I wish. I'm a free person." In August 2021, having lost a lover and a job, Adam went camping and targeted his ex-coworker and her wife. After emptying his gun on them, he undressed them to humiliate them and threw them in the water. Then he ran to his ex in Waterloo, Iowa to get this off his chest. When his ex asked him why he Crystal and her wife, he just said Crystal was too bossy. Then Adam deleted all of the photos on his phone, his Google history, and his Facebook account, and in September 2021, a month after the murders, he took his own life. The police only found out about this in March 2022, a full 6 months after he'd taken his own life. 2 months later, they were finally able to close the case.
Bob and Kelly, good evening to you both. Just an emotional day here in Moab. For months, the community has been wanting answers on the unsolved murders of Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner. Well, today, some of those answers were made public and brought to light.
Of course, this was a bittersweet moment. There's little justice when the killer takes the easy way out.
The sheriff's office had learned that Mr. Pinkowitz was in the LaSalle's and Moab at the time of the homicides and had left the state of Utah shortly after the homicides.
Interestingly enough, Adam had become a prime suspect in the murders just a few months into the case. But as the police were unable to locate him, they continued to look at other suspects. Indeed, it took a long time until they discovered he'd taken his own life.
Prior to committing suicide, Mr. Pinkowitz told another party that he had killed 2 women in Utah and provided details that were only specific to the investigators in the case.
Adam's car, which was also seen at the scene of the crime, was eventually located. He'd sold it in Waterloo shortly after the murders. In his suicide note, he complained about his McDonald's lefty liberal bosses criticizing him for not working fast enough. He'd taken years of rage and personal frustration out on poor Crystal, who just happened to work at the same place and had a stronger work ethic than him. Kylan was just collateral damage. She was only 25. However, her grieving dad shared a touching moment with the sheriff. He was devastated, but he could finally grieve. Strangely enough, an anonymous tipper had left a clue about Adam in Sean Paul's clue booth month before.
I can't believe I picked up a clue on Adam Pincus in my clue booth in the park. I cannot believe it. The only other thing I can say is that I hope they can process the evidence and close the case.
The case was closed in December 2022, 15 months after Kylan and Crystal were killed. But is this any justice for a newlywed couple who had their whole lives ahead of them? Hey guys, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you know of any other similar cases? Let me know in the comment section. And before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you never miss another episode. See you next time.